Welcome to the Foundation for Physical Therapy Research webinar, Pathways for PhD's. Thank you for joining us. I am Liz Jackson, and I'm the Senior Specialist for Grants and Scholarships for the Foundation. Glenn Hawkins will moderate the discussion. Our guest speakers will discuss the promotion of doctoral studies 1 and 2, or as we like to call them, the PhD's scholarships, their application process, and key strategies on how to submit an outstanding application in pursuit of research funding and support opportunities. We will officially introduce our speakers and ask them questions after this brief presentation of our current scholarships and grants. Please save all questions until the very end, and we will try our best to get to them. If not, we will follow up with you after the webinar. The mechanisms we have available: we identify the best qualified applicants for grants and scholarships. These innovative researchers advance care across medical disciplines and patient populations. Our scholarship program provides promotion of doctoral studies, PhD's 1 and 2, and research grants are available for eligible applicants, which include, beginning with the PhD's 1s, their scholarships and grants that are available for pre-candidacy PhD students and PhD candidates. Our PhD's 2s are available for PhD candidates. Our research grants are available for emerging investigators and experienced investigators. Our PhD's 1 opportunities are available for $7,500 per year, and they can be awarded twice to the same applicant in different years. We look for pre-candidacy PhD students to apply for the PhD's 1s. The PhD's 2s are $15,000 per year, and they can be awarded twice to the same applicant in different years. And those would be PhD candidates or people currently in PhD programs finishing up their PhDs. The NIFTY or combined PhD's 2 NIFTY will not be offered in 2024. These opportunities are available for any area of research, and we have dedicated funding that supports focused areas as shown, including the APTA Academy of Education Fund, PhD's. Funding is available in odd-numbered years for education-focused research. The APTA Academy of Neurological Physical Therapy Fund supports a PhD's 1 and a PhD's 2. The APTA Academy of Pediatric Physical Therapy Fund supports a PhD's 1. The APTA Academy of Cardiovascular and Pulmonary Physical Therapy Fund supports a PhD's 2. The APTA Academy of Pelvic Health Physical Therapy funds PhD's. An APTA Academy of Geriatric Physical Therapy funds a PhD's 1 and a PhD's 2. Charlene May Nelson Fund prefers a clinical electrophysiology project, and additional funds include Mildred Wood, Viva J. Erickson, Bella May, Romberger, and APTA general funds that support physical therapy research in all areas. Visit our website for more detailed information on our PhD's 1 and 2 opportunities. The deadline for applications is early January. In 2024, we have a number of research grants available. The Foundation provides around $500,000 in research grants annually. This slide lists grants we anticipate offering next year. The Foundation Research Grant is a general physical therapy research grant. The Geriatrics Research Grant is a geriatric-focused grant. The Education Research Grant would be a grant in education research. The Academy of Orthopedic Physical Therapy Research Grant is available in 2024. A Geriatric Research Grant. And then we have a couple of named grants. The Snyder Research Grant and a Moffitt grant is available in opposite years in geriatric physical therapy research. Visit our website to learn more about all of our funding opportunities and how to apply. Education research grants are supported by the APTA Academy of Education Fund and are offered every other year. The next grant will be available in 2024. 2023 grants are being awarded in early December. The $100,000 Foundation for Physical Therapy Research Grants are available annually, and that is the Magistro Family Foundation Research Grant, a Paris Patla Physical Therapy Research Grant, and a Paris Patla Manual Physical Therapy Research Grant. These grants require a letter of intent that is due in early June, with the full grant application deadline falling in early August. We utilize proposalcentral.com to collect your applications. Go there and create a logon. ORCID will be required if you are funded, and is a great thing if you're planning a research career to track all of your publications and easily include them in your applications and reports to us. If you put physical therapy in the search box at proposalcentral.com, our opportunities will populate for you, and you just click the Apply Now button next to the opportunity of your choice to begin your application. If you create a title and save it, the full application opens for you, and we do not see your submission until you validate and submit it to us. Do not be afraid to click the Validate button throughout your application submission process. It will populate a list of what you are missing that is required in your submission. Read those instructions carefully, as some items may not be required to submit your application to us. The foundation has a unique role in research. We are the only national nonprofit solely dedicated to physical therapy research. We use a rigorous peer review model to find the most promising applicants across fields of interest. We've awarded over $22.7 million in grants, fellowships, and scholarships for promising PT researchers. We have supported over 702 researchers who began their careers with foundation funding, and over $896 million in follow-on funding has been secured by formally funded foundation researchers. There are a number of upcoming events that can help you with your grantsmanship. There's a training in grantsmanship for rehabilitation research. Check their website for eligibility and participation. That is coming up in South Carolina from January 8th through 12th, 2024. And also, you can connect with us at the APTA Combined Sections meeting in Boston in February from the 15th to the 17th, and we will have hours that the research team will be available to answer any questions you have related to applying for funds for support. This is the slide that talks about GAMER, and this is a grant writing and mentorship and education research. And they would be happy to help guide you in grant submission and launching your career in education research. And I will hand this over to Glenn Hawkins, our Senior Specialist of Communications, to introduce our panelists and moderate the discussion.
All right, thank you very much for that introduction, Liz. I'm just going to go through our introductions here. So starting out, we have Sarah Gilliland, who is from Chapman University and is a movement specialist working on education research. She was awarded a PODS 1 scholarship in 2011, a second PODS 1 scholarship in 2012, and a PODS 2 scholarship in 2014 for her work focusing on education research. She's quoted as stating that education, like clinical practice, requires ongoing thought and development, and that knowledge alone does not make one an educator. Next, I'd like to introduce Sarah Davidson. Sarah is a 2023 PODS 1 recipient attending Youngstown State University. Her project is titled Grip Force Modulations, Indicator of Parkinson's Disease Severity. Sarah has been a PTA for 12 years and has worked full-time in research for 7 years. She currently works at the Neural Control Lab at the Cleveland Clinic and is working towards her PhD in health sciences. Excuse me. Next, we have Gara Sani. And Gara is a 2022 PODS 2 recipient working at the University of Minnesota to complete her studies. Her work is titled Scapular Mechanisms of Movement-Related Shoulder Dysfunction. And finally, I'd like to introduce Lindsay Jubina. Lindsay is a 2022 PODS 1 recipient supported by APTA's Academy of Acute Care. She is completing her work at the University of Kentucky, and that work is titled The Impact of Social Determinants of Health on the Utilization of Rehabilitation After ICU Admission. I'd like to say, first of all, I just want to welcome all of you and thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. So I think the first question we want to jump into today, and these are questions that we've received from folks who've registered, is asking about strategies for having a really solid application. So that would be useful, especially for advice for clinicians who have turned into researchers, noting that this pivot has kind of been a challenge. Is there anyone who'd like to start us off on that? All right, Sarah, please take it away.
All right, I'm happy to join in on this one. I would say the number one is obviously start planning way ahead. So I know the deadlines are in January, but I think when I did the pods, I was always starting to pull stuff together in like September. And I would say, yeah, for someone who's coming from a clinician, I think you're actually coming from a great background because you have real world evidence to support the argument for why you're doing what you're doing. And I felt like in my applications, that was a really big part, especially because I was coming from the education world and writing about education at a time, honestly, before education was really a big topic in PT. And so I knew that I really had to put forth my argument in terms of why this mattered. So I would say, if you're coming from the clinical world, you've probably identified a problem that's driving you into your research area. And then that's also where your lit review really becomes important, that you use your identification and the existing literature and possibly calls. I was fortunate in education that I think in 2011, Gail Jensen had done a keynote talk that really put forward some calls for exactly the work that I was looking at. So it was really helpful to tie into that. The other thing to be aware of in the pods is part of what you're writing about is your plan of study. And so that's sort of a second part, is really looking at the program that you're in, your mentor, maybe anybody who's on your team, if you're starting to put together like your dissertation committee, and identifying how are they experts in that area to be mentoring you, and how is your course of education contributing to giving you the knowledge and skills that you need to really move forward in your field. And again, sometimes this takes, I would use the word maybe a little creative thought, because again, I actually went through a traditional school of education. So I was the only PT in the PhD program that I was in. And so I really had to dig to explain why doing, linguistic analysis of inequities in education was relevant. That was one of the courses I did. And why was that relevant to what I was doing for clinical reasoning? So I think there's a lot of places, and my biggest piece of advice is just start early, because it is going to take some digging in terms of really making those connections for people. I think that's the one thing, is just assume that your audience doesn't understand what you're doing or why you're doing it. And then also just gives you time to really dig into the literature.
Great. Thanks so much, Sarah. Panel, anything to add to that?
I can go. That was very thorough. I would second everything you said, Sarah. My other recommendation is to take a grant writing class or a course if you can find one. I took I think it was called the Right Winning NIH Grants seminar, and I think it just travels around, and it was excellent. And it gave me a workbook. And the biggest thing is it helped me not only design my study and improve my study design, but be able to describe it. And even like sentence structure, formatting suggestions to make it super easy on the reviewers to find the information that they need. So I would definitely seek out those types of opportunities at your institution or outside of your institution if they are available.
Thanks very much. Any other thoughts before we move on to our next question?
I can add a little bit to this. I feel like this is kind of a twofold question. So for as far as strategies for having a solid application, I think I have two main pieces of advice. One of them is to follow the directions extremely carefully, because if you don't get the directions correct, there's a chance that your proposal may not even be reviewed. So definitely read through multiple times and highlight things and make sure that you're following everything exactly as the proposal suggests. And the other advice I have for that is to just allow your passion for your topic to show through. I think there is a slight difference between writing for a scholarship or a grant and writing for like a peer-reviewed journal or a course. You don't, obviously you still want to be scientific, but you're allowed to use I and to express your passion for that project that you're proposing with the scholarship application. And as far as advice for clinicians turned researchers, I can speak to this personally since I worked in inpatient rehab for 4 years before transitioning to research. And I think the hardest thing for me was changing my mindset from having an impact on individuals to having a broader impact, say, on a population. So, for example, in inpatient rehab, you're working with one patient at a time. Your goal is to get them home, get them walking again, what have you. When I was first hired in research, I was on a study looking at the effects of aerobic exercise on recovery and chronic stroke. And we had a very, not a stringent inclusion-exclusion criteria, but not everyone was going to qualify for the study. And that was really hard for me to get used to, telling people that they don't qualify for the study. So switching that mindset from, you're not just helping individuals, your goal is to, have solid research that where your end result, exactly what you did that caused those outcomes so that you can make an impact on more people than just the one person that you're seeing at the time.
All right. Thanks so much for that. And a couple of folks have mentioned this. This kind of dovetails well into our next question, which is, can we have those of you on the panel think about the best advice that you've received, maybe from a mentor or a teacher or someone like that? And could you share that advice with the folks that are watching at home?
I can start with this one. So for me, I think the hardest idea I had starting as a PhD student was having these really big questions, wanting to change the world mentality, and realizing that I'm not going to change the world during my PhD and maybe not even during my career. But I think it helps because it helps you formulate, especially when you are grant writing, in terms of you have this overarching career goal or big question. But now we have to think about what parts can we pull out that we can tangibly study, and also how do we develop questions from this overarching theme. So I think it helps in terms of just guiding your mindset. But the best advice I think I got was that I'm not going to change the world right now. And I think it's just kind of, honing in on what exactly do I want to do now in my career and what's in the future in my career and how those steps build to answer that overarching trajectory. And that was something really hard to formalize. And I think I'm still trying to process what that looks like in my next steps moving forward.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. Sarah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm happy to kind of dovetail on that. I would say 2 pieces of advice, and also just jokingly, something that I say to people at this point in my career is I feel like I've reached this point where it's like the academic version of when you're becoming your mother is when you hear your PhD advisor's words coming out of your mouth. But the 2 things that she really instilled in me was try to connect everything. I really started, my dissertation started from a couple little projects that I did as course projects, and then growing those and weaving them together. And it was sort of this piece where I came in very intimidated by this, oh my gosh, because we had sort of these structured pieces. You had to do a poster your first year, a journal article your second year, and it sort of built towards your dissertation. And I think kind of coming back to where Lindsay is at is like, I had this big picture, but I was like, how the heck do I turn those into pieces? And that was something that she really helped me to see how little things I'd done as course assignments could grow and then weave together. And essentially, it turned into my research agenda, which I think is another piece, whether that's within the PhD process or sort of in your next steps as you move into a faculty or researcher role, is how do you take this thing you did that you absolutely loved and turn it into an agenda? And then the other piece really comes down to the writing side. And I think this is a key part when you're writing your applications is, and I think a couple folks already mentioned this, make it very clear to your reader. So use your headers, use your subheaders, use topic sentences, make it very clear so that your reader can follow what's going on.
Good advice. Thank you. Anything else?
I can chime in. So actually, when I was thinking about this in the last few days, it's not really advice. It's more just something that someone said to me. And it's very similar to what you said, Sarah Davidson, earlier. When I was transitioning from being in the clinic to being a researcher and feeling like, am I giving something up or something like that? I had heard someone describe working in the career or as in the clinic for your career and say perhaps you treat 10,000 individuals and you improve their lives one at a time. Whereas working in a research career during that same amount of time, you're maybe creating something or discovering something that will change how we treat. And you'll, in the end, affect that many people, if not more. You're just coming at these clinical problems from a different direction. And again, I know that's not advice, but it was something that just really resonated with me as I was making the transition from the clinic to the research setting.
Yeah, thanks very much, Cara. I'm going to move then on to our next question, which is, can you speak a little bit about the expectations for PODS 1 applicants that have maybe not yet begun their PhD program, and so they might not have created a thorough research plan because they haven't had the classes yet? Do you have any tips on how to be competitive in that situation?
I think we kind of alluded to this earlier on when talking about that transition phase, but I think it's one, taking the clinical background you have, the knowledge you do have, the patient experience you have, and really making that shine, because in some sense, the reason you want to do research is probably driven by a patient interaction or some frustration you had within our practice. Something at one point made you think, we need to do better, or there needs to be more evidence for this or that. So I think you have more knowledge than you give yourself credit for starting out from a clinical background. But also on the flip side, that lit review is very, very important. So I think it's a skill to take a lot of literature and then write this document that's really concise and highlights everything you want to do. And that's very challenging. But I think that is where you start. I think the literature and the evidence is really your foundation. So you take that clinical practice with what already exists and then highlight where you're going to study and what you see as a potential area for further questions or investigation. And I think there's enough unstudied areas and need for more evidence in our practice that you can do it. It's very possible to do so.
I would actually totally tail on what Lindsay just said, because it wasn't in this situation. It was actually for another one where I was writing that wanted my dissertation plan like a year before I had actually gotten there. But I think either way, yeah, diving into the literature, linking it in. But then for a PODS 1, the other thing is it actually gives you a great opportunity to look at what is the coursework that you might do and how can you link that, because it can actually not only can kind of thinking about that help you write a better application, but it actually can help you better strategize your plan as you're going through.
All right, thanks very much. Unless there are any final thoughts on that subject, we can go ahead and move to the next question. All right. Let me ask this. What are some of the most attractive qualities of a grant application, from concept, methods, and just a general proof of support perspective?
I can start. So I haven't served as a reviewer before, so I struggled a little bit when I was thinking about this, but I thought perhaps I would share some of the general feedback I've received on my previous applications. And I found that in general, the comments tended to reflect that they were looking for a well-rounded mentorship team and a really clear explanation of how each mentor what skills they were going to train me in and how did that relate to what I said I would be doing for my proposed study. So linking each of those things. And then they also really wanted to see robust support for my study design and my methods. And that can come through your citations, your literature review, as well as preliminary data if you're able to provide any of that as kind of a proof of concept.
Great. Thanks, Gara. Who else? What makes a grant application attractive?
Add on to this, I've actually served as a reviewer for the Academy of Education research grants. And I think, it really comes back to things that everyone's already said, being really clear and really making that connection. So not only is it making the case for why your topic is important, but it's also really making that connection from your purpose statement. And especially if you're, like in education, it's like we always have to set up our theoretical framework because it's not a direct, sort of objective observational type of data. And so setting that up and then, making sure that your description for your methods and your data is consistent. I actually just did a session at ELC on abstract reviewing, and that's one of the big things, whether it's abstracts or grants. Are you following? Have you given the information? And I don't remember who said, make sure that you address what's asked for in each section, and then make sure that your sections connect, that what you're saying in one section, whether it's a lit review or like lay language summary, make sure that that connects to what you're saying you're going to do as your methods. And then the same thing, how does that all link to your plan of study and how do your mentors contribute to that? So it's really making sure you connect the dots.
That's great. Thanks so much, everyone. We've talked about what makes a really attractive application. Let's talk a little bit about the other side. So did anyone like to share any sort of lessons learned or maybe something that you wish you'd done earlier on a project that might be beneficial to the folks who are listening today?
For me, I think this advice was echoed earlier on, but starting as early as possible to give yourself time, especially with the pods and any grant, really, you're not working isolated or by yourself. So you're having other people who are reviewing it or helping you throughout the process. So you have to be fair to their time as well. And that definitely is a learning process for me to start things earlier, to give people time to review and give good feedback. I think that is something that I've learned throughout the process. And then with the pods specifically, the training plan in terms of outlining what you're going to do, but connecting it back to the people who are mentoring you. That was also something that, myself could have strengthened in some of my applications. And, even moving forward with professional training plans, it's something that I'm going to make sure that, it's the right people with the right expertise and that it makes sense. So kind of like Sarah was saying, connecting those dots is really important. So I think if you're missing some of those components, it's hard for a reviewer to understand that you're really, in a pods example, receiving the training and mentoring that you need to actually address your research agenda.
That's great. Thanks so much, Lindsay. Who next? Some thoughts on lessons learned through the process? Yes, Sarah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that everyone should be hearing loud and clear the start early. And I am going to say this on when you're asking for rec letters, give them artificially early deadlines, because I had a rec letter writer that had me like anxiety through the roof because they hadn't submitted it. And so, yeah. And the other part too is coming back to the writing understandable. Make sure that you have other people read it. So again, finish it, get it to a complete, if I were alone, I would submit this now and then get it, whether you have, like in your program, if you have a lab group, or even if you just have classmates. That was one that I loved going through my PhD program, was we were constantly reading each other's work and giving feedback, because the real key is, I tell people, I'm like, when I read my own writing, I read what I meant to write, whether that's what I actually wrote. And so it's absolutely critical to have other people read it so that you know that you're making sense to other people.
Great. Thanks so much. Any other, sorry, Gar, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll chime in real quick. I was thinking with pods, especially, you have to compile letters of support from people who are going to be assisting with your training and your mentorship. And so you also should make sure that they're aware of what you've described their role in your project to be, so that their letters can match up. Maybe have a meeting, sit down and talk through what your mentorship plan is, because you want to make sure those things are in agreement.
That's great advice. Thanks so much. Throughout this process, I was seeing some head nods, so clearly some universal concepts here that we're talking about. Let's move a little bit into talking a little bit about the benefits of pursuing a PhD after achieving your doctoral degree, physical therapy. What sets you apart from DPTs, and how did your PhD education, do you think, impact the most?
I'm happy to jump in on this, because my PhD education impacted me in ways way beyond what I was thinking about going in. I have been an educator. I actually was a high school teacher before I became a PT. So the education thing has been in my heart for a long time. So I was teaching adjunct before I started my PhD. And that was when I knew that I wanted to be a faculty member. I wanted to be involved in education. And to be honest, in the beginning, I kind of saw the PhD was just, I need to check this box so I can get a full-time core position. Once I got into my PhD, it kind of changed my perspective overall. And that's actually the number one thing I would say in my experience, is it completely changed the way I look at things. Especially, going into education is a really interesting area, because education is this multidisciplinary, it's psychology, it's cognitive science, it's sociology, it's anthropology, it's kind of everything. And so you learn to look at things through all these different lenses. And so that was something that really changed for me, was it changed just how, so again, as I've moved forward and identified new problems that I'm looking at in my research, it's given me different perspectives to look at them from, and it's given me different ways to ask the questions. And I think more so for me in an area that felt like I had all these questions and problems, but I was like, how the heck do you turn this into something that's answerable? It gave me those skills to take it that step, to go from a question to a method to an answer. But yeah, I will just say, not only for me with the PhD, just the new perspectives, but the connections and the conversations that happen within other people in your program, with your mentors, and then, through other people that you meet, whether it's through APTA or other methods. But yeah, mine was like, I'm going to say it was a life changer.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Who else? Yeah, Lindsay, go ahead.
Yeah, Sarah, I liked how you said check the box, because at one point that was in the back of my head of, I knew I wanted to be a faculty member. I want to do this to, get myself to that place in my career. Same thing where I never thought I would actually enjoy research. Let's put it that way. And I find myself now gravitating towards wanting to continue to do research and on this research track that I'm really excited about. But I think the biggest title I could give myself from transitioning from a DPT to a PhD student is that you're more of an independent learner as a PhD student. So you drive it more yourself, and you kind of create this environment of, what do I want to learn? What do I want to become an expert in? And then, like you said, make those connections or mentorships to set yourself up to, drive your research agenda. But I also think becoming like an independent researcher. For me personally, during my PT program, we had the basic research foundation that's we needed, but I did not feel confident at all in my research skills as a DPT. Even reading articles, I feel like now it's a whole different realm of actually understanding the literature and understanding stats. So I definitely think that for me, there's a lot more of that independent research side, but also independent learner that I've grown into.
That's great. Thank you, Lindsay. Anyone else on that topic? Yeah, go ahead, Cara.
So I think maybe my experience is a tad bit different because I went into my PhD specifically because I really wanted to do research. And I just don't think I could possibly do the research I'm doing right now without the technical training I've received through this degree. So it probably really depends on the area of research you want to do. Some things maybe can be done with the clinical skills we learn in the DPT programs. But I'm in really detailed biomechanics, technical stuff that was way beyond what we would learn in the PT classroom. So I totally agree with what has already been said, that you really change what you're learning. And then for me too, if your goal is to be an independent researcher, I don't think we have the skills to be able to really apply the scientific method that way through a DPT. And I also don't know how competitive we could be for some funding mechanisms without a PhD. So I hate to say that it is checking that box, but I think if your goal is to be obtaining your own independent funding and pursuing your own research agenda, I think it will be just extra difficult if you don't proceed to pursue extra education.
Thanks so much.
Yes,
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah. Sorry.
Go off of that. Hopefully my connection issues are resolved. I apologize for that. But I'm obviously not a DPT, a PTA, but I work with a few PTs, including one who also has her PhD. And the reason she initially went back to get her PhD was because she was getting turned away for some grants because they see DPT as a clinical doctorate. Whether or not that's right is another conversation, but it does help with being competitive for grant funding. And I talked to a few of my PT colleagues about how they felt their DPT differed from their PhD. And I think the theme that I heard from them and also from the others in this panel is that the DPT taught you how to consume research, and the PhD teaches you how to produce research. So it really depends on what route you want to go.
Thanks so much, Sarah. This last question I want to ask to the panel, this is someone who asked, what if I find myself in a position where I'm not receiving a lot of support? So I'm kind of having to lean on myself more and maybe don't have as much access to mentorship as someone else. What advice would you give to that person?
I will totally jump in on this one because while I definitely had support from my PhD advisor, my mentor, as a PT in a school of education, there really weren't a lot of other people that could directly talk to my topics because I was interested in clinical reasoning from the education perspective. And I am just going to say APTA networking has been amazing for me. And sometimes it takes I am normally not the kind of person that walks up to somebody that I'm like, I've read all your articles and just introduce myself. But I ended up in a situation where I was in a fairly small group meeting, and pretty much I realized, I think I was in my second year in the program, and I realized I'm sitting here at the table with the people who've written all the articles that I've been reading. And I just started talking to them, and those connections, I will actually tell you, I'm now probably for the last 10 years have been part of a research group with folks I met that night, and folks who had written the papers. And I actually did end up pulling, so because of the fact that I did want somebody who was a PT education researcher on my committee, I ended up pulling somebody from that group into my dissertation committee. And it has just been amazing because it's like, I mean, yes, I'm going to say what you know and can do matters, but who you know also matters a lot. And so if you can't get it within your institution or locally, look to your focus area, you know, whether it's through a certain academy in the APTA, whether it's through a SIG within that academy, maybe it's a task force within some academy. Just whatever you can do to connect with other people in the country that are interested in this stuff. And I will tell you, my experience, at least in education, and I hope that I'm kind of carrying this on now, is everyone that I've approached has been so supportive. And so there's just different ways that you can work with it. It takes getting out of the box. I know, you know, some of my classmates in my PhD program, the big names in their field were in our program. So that was easy for them. They were right there. It was a little different for me, but AP, I tell everyone, I'm like, APTA has been my connection into the research world.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. What other advice would you have for someone in sort of a low support environment? Yeah, Lindsay.
Yeah, I think for me, some of my mentorship has come from classes I've taken outside of my department as a PhD student. So, you know, some of the other faculty on your campus may be of interest to you. So, for example, my research deals a lot with like public health and health disparities. So I had to reach outside to different colleges to make that connection. And my co-chair of my committee, she's in the College of Public Health. So, you know, I have that mentorship. But I think echoing what Sarah said, there's also the APTA, because I think there's a lot of maybe misconstrued thoughts in terms of reaching out to people who maybe intimidate you because they do publish so much, or they seem to present so much and they do so much. But I think on the flip side, a lot of those people are willing to have a conversation. Maybe they don't have the capacity to mentor you, but I'm sure they know somebody who could. So I think not being intimidated and knowing that we truly should all be doing this to improve our practice and improve patient care in the long term. So I think keeping that in the back of your head when you do need those connections or reaching out to people, that we're all human and we all got somewhere by help from someone else. So passing that forward too.
Great. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Any other thoughts on that topic before we head out? All right. My last question that I want to ask the panel. We've talked about what makes a great application. We talked about some lessons learned. What final thoughts do you have for some of the folks who may be sort of starting out on this pathway to a PhD?
I can go. I just also want to acknowledge that we will apply for a lot of funding opportunities, scholarships, things like that we don't get. And that is so true for everyone, myself included. In fact, I applied for a PODS 1 that I did not get, but then I went on to get a PODS 2. And so it's very common. It happens to everyone, and don't let yourself get discouraged. You know, take a beat, live in that moment, but then look at the reviewer feedback and use that to improve your next round of applications. And once you kind of get your foot in the door and you get one application that's funded, it seems all of a sudden like it's a lot easier to produce your next one and feel more confident about it.
Great advice. Thanks so much, Gara. What other final thoughts do we have?
Yeah, I would echo on what Gara said, that it's, you know, I honestly would say I felt like my PhD process was like one of the biggest emotional roller coasters that I've been on. There are some amazing highs when you get things accepted, when you make connections, or when you get recognized for stuff. And then there's these lows when you like put all of this work into a paper and it gets rejected from a journal, like right off. And so you need to go in mentally knowing that that's what's coming ahead. And just really looking, I think one of the other things about a PhD process is really thinking about, what do I want to get out of it? Because you will encounter other people, whether it's other faculty in your program or directions that are trying to pull you off and things. They're like, oh, you could go, do this part, you could do this part. Stay true to what drove you, because, I was just talking with one of my colleagues who's thinking about going into a PhD program. And I'm like, you need to be so passionate about what you're going forward with, because no matter how passionate are you, there are going to be times you're going to hate it, but you still need to have enough drive to keep you going. And again, I think I can't say enough about networking and connection, whether it's classmates. I am probably still really close friends with a handful of folks that I went through my PhD program with, just because it's you're sharing such an intense point in your lives. And then the other part too is that networking, once as you start to look out of your program, and where is it? Do you plug into a PTA somewhere? Do you, plug into some research team? Because I will say, I have now gotten into a number of leadership positions in the Academy for Education that wouldn't have happened had I not done my PhD, had I not done the work that came out of it. And so I'm kind of in an exciting place in my career where I'm now in those positions of not only doing the research, but helping to look at, strategies in terms of how do we actually make change in a broader sort of setting. So yeah, I think that's just the thing, is just know, and do a lot of searching. If you're not sure if this is really your thing, maybe it's time to wait on the PhD and give yourself a little more time to sort of find that one thing that keeps you awake at night.
I was just going to say too, in terms of make sure it's right time, talk to people who are in the program or are PhD students or have just done a PhD, and ask those questions that maybe you're not comfortable asking a current faculty member, your potential mentor, because we'll be honest with you, we're not going to sugarcoat what the process is like, because again, it is a commitment. It's a time commitment. It can be a financial commitment for sure. So I think that, people who go into this, like you said, have to have some sort of passion. But I think on the flip side, for me, having gone through undergraduate, DPT, residency, and then taking on a PhD, I told myself that at this point in my life, I want life to continue outside of school. That was something that was really important to me, and it's happened. I just got married last month and went on a honeymoon, and I'm still on track to get done. So I think keep that in mind too, that life can still happen outside of PhD, because it's very different learning style than what you've done before. And there's flexibility too. So just keep that in the back of your mind too, that there are sacrifices, of course, but it's a whole different type of adult learning than a doctorate physical therapy program.
That's great advice, Lindsay. And may I add, congratulations.
Thank you.
Any other final thoughts? All right.
I have a final thought.
Please, yeah.
Since I unfortunately missed since I unfortunately missed the best advice that you received, I kind of want to tie that in. So, as a PTA, starting in research, I wasn't even sure that I had a place in research. I always thought that this was more for PTs. And when I was first starting in this career and was talking to my principal investigator, my PI, he said, I want you to write PTA on the dry erase board. And I thought that was strange, but I did. And he said, I feel like you think of yourself like this. And he wrote PTA with a huge A. And he said, you have experiences and knowledge that still can contribute to the research world. So try not to define yourself just by that A in your title. Obviously, I still have a license as a PTA, so I'm limited in some of the things that I can do, but that really helped me realize that I did have the ability to contribute. There's not many PTAs in research, but we are out there. And I think that the fact that the FPTR will consider and fund PTAs for this PODS grant really speaks to that. So if there are any PTAs out there listening, don't feel like you can't.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone. I want to thank our panel for your fantastic advice. Thank you so much for giving us so generously of your time today. And for the folks at home, I hope you enjoyed the show. If there are not questions we didn't get to, we'll try to follow up with you afterward. And you can visit our website for more information about the foundation, grants, scholarships, and upcoming events. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.